Hi, I'm Jacob.
I'm Michael.
And we're the Vinyl Verdict, and we're going to be reviewing Ass by Badfinger today, the last release on Apple by a non-Beatle. Pretty amazing final album on Apple Records that Badfinger released. So we have the CD and the original vinyl. It was released in November of 1973, right around Thanksgiving in the US. It wasn't released in the UK until March of the next year of 74. Hard to separate, I think, a lot of this album and the music in this album from the situation and what was happening in the band and kind of the promotion behind it. We'll try to focus mostly on the music, but we'll cover a little bit of that context up front because it is so hard to separate. So the album hit number 122 on the Billboard 200, so it didn't even put a dent. And it had been basically 2 years since Straight Up was released. So there was a large gap between the previous album and this album. And as I mentioned when we did No Dice, I really think of No Dice, Straight Up, and Ass as a trilogy of kind of the peak Badfinger on Apple Records. And this is kind of the sunset, as the album suggests. It's only 40 minutes long, but wow, does it kind of feel shorter than that. One of the major criticisms of this album is that it's only 10 tracks, but in terms of length, it's pretty similar to Straight Up and No Dice. They all clock in at about 40 minutes. Overall, this album is notable for being much more of a raw sound compared to those other albums, even though we said No Dice was pretty raw too. So it's almost like an arc. Straight Up gets all this production, all this attention from George Harrison producing it, Todd Rundgren, all of the guest appearances, all of these medleys, and then Ass, it's like back to basics. Feels like a lot of these songs are more focused on the instrumentation, which is fantastic on this album. The musicality.
It's a muscular, a different production sound.
It's just Badfinger basically behind a lot of the production. Obviously, Chris Thomas came in at one point and had worked on and Todd Rundgren had produced two of the songs on the album at the end of Straight Up, which we'll talk about. But for the most part, like, Badfinger was kind of left to their own devices, and it's interesting that in a vacuum they went towards this focusing on instrumentation, I think, more than anything else, and really fleshing out the guitar parts and stuff in here, I think, are among the most complex they ever wrote. It's Joey dominant, and then Joey Mullen wrote 5 of the 10 songs on the album. Pete wrote 2, Tom wrote 2, Mike Gibbons wrote 1. Again, more proportional towards Joey compared to their previous albums. But there's a lot of information that suggests Joey had never signed with Apple, and so he was able to write songs while the rest were maybe holding back. And they were trying to even hold back release of the album for a long period of time, which is why it was stuck. And then eventually, when it was released, I think all the songs were released as written by Badfinger.
They were. It was a unbelievably long wait. We didn't understand any of the business issues or anything at all. We just loved this group. But no, it wasn't what we were expecting. From the album opener, Apple of My Eye, it was a beautiful, beautiful melody. It kind of looked like maybe this is the AM one, or we were looking for what's the next day after day, or Baby Blue, of course. And they didn't have to repeat themselves. And I don't think they ever really did in that way, but it was an album for Badfinger fans that were already fans, and we loved it. And yet, in hindsight, the commercial door was pretty well closed to them at this point.
Put the needle on the record, and the first thing we hear is a cappella, Apple of My Eye. Listening to it now, I just can't believe this was a single. It's so strange. Obviously it's Pete Ham's voice. It makes sense as the lead-off track for the album, but it's so depressive. I think a lot of his songs have this melancholiness and everything like that, his hit songs, but there's an edge to them a little bit where he's in control. Here it feels like he has no control.
There was a sadness. Even though day after day the guy's theoretically pining in his room, I guess, or literally pining in his room according to it, but you don't get that. There's too much power in the song. And as you say, this was more of thinking of there was a melancholy, and there was a great beauty to it in a simple kind of way, and the production layered on layer. It didn't seem to have the power to kick through that public commercial door the same way they had in 72, and I loved the album no less. You thought there was going to be one, and you didn't know what it was going to be. And this was supposed to be it because of Pete, I guess, and it just didn't seem that it had the power to do it.
It follows a little bit in the steps of Baby Blue and kind of this apology song, but it's just total humility. There's no ego or anything, whereas Baby Blue, there's a little bit of that creeping in it, especially in the middle eights and stuff. Yeah, and then it's Pete double-tracked, which is weird to me too. This is a band, Tom Evans is still here. Why is Pete being double-tracked? It seems like the harmonies could be similar to what they did with Day After Day, featuring the whole band. It feels a little bit too much like a Pete Ham home demo, I think.
Interesting, in the Japanese film, you do see each of them. You see Pete working on Apple of My Eye. You see Joey cross-legged doing a little Icicles. You see Tom, When I Say. But yeah, Apple of My Eye certainly was born acoustically, and despite all the great production, which it did have, remained kind of an acoustic type of beauty to it, even when their harmonies come in at the end.
Getaway by Joey Mullen is track number 2, and it starts with the same note that Apple of My Eye ended on, but it's not really a medley. I actually, when I was listening to this, I'm like, that's kind of a missed opportunity that it could have bled through a little bit more. I mean, it's a good sequencing in that it carries that note on. And then it's the opposite. The first track we heard pure acoustic and Pete Ham. Now we're piano bass. Kind of how this kicks off, and then some electric guitar just cutting right through you in the first 30 seconds. So that's a big change from the acoustic opening.
Yeah, it's a big change, and it's the first taste you're going to get on this album, and on many albums after that, of the Joey ability to grab onto a chord structure and a riff and just take it for all the way home. You could say it's repetitive or this or that, but who's ever playing the lead guitar in this, Pete Ham, I don't want to say anything else. It's fantastic, and
it's really good for 12-bar blues kind of stuff. I mean, it's like
amazing,
really impressive. And when he double times some of those notes in the middle section, really good lead playing.
Yeah,
it's a shuffle beat, and that's what's so cool, I think, for the lead playing, and it lets Pete kind of play around when he's soloing around the shuffle beat.
The lead is a treat.
Yeah. Well, and that's the edge that was missing in Apple of My Eye. It's like, Pete Ham couldn't really articulate anything but, a kindness, and then Joey comes in immediately just telling someone to piss off, basically, in the second song. So it's a good contrast.
Yes, it is a good contrast.
And then, and I like even the middle 8 where the like, I may be wrong, great breakdown of the song and getting his a cappella in there a little bit.
Yeah, he was beginning to catch he was on fire.
And it's produced pretty well in that you got this brass that comes in halfway through the song, and the lead is kind of mimicking the brass, and so there's actually an arrangement on this song which is a little more. It's more than a couple of the other songs got. I feel like bringing in brass.
It's a little involved.
So we get into Icicles, another Joey Mullen song. It kicks off with some backwards guitar from Pete Ham. I believe the only time Badfinger did this.
The guitar work is so beautiful, and it came in winter, the album, and there was a song Icicles on it, and it just reminded me of snow melting into a beautiful spring morning with the sun, and it was an optimistic song. It's completely different from the poignancy and the sensitivity of some of the Pete Ham things, or even Tommy, but it was sensitive in its own way. Isn't it good when there was a real gift beginning to be shown? It wasn't just Love Me Do and rock songs. This was a beautiful song, and I've been in love with it for a lot of years. I think it's a real great effort.
In the musicality, some interesting things. So it sounds to me like Joey's double-tracked, which I found interesting, because Getaway, you said it was Tom Evans. So it's like, straight up, you didn't really have these things where someone's double-tracked on a song, but we're going to see this a couple times on the album. So I thought that was interesting. The guitar solo is crazy in the middle. I think it's 3 different lead parts, or at least 2 different strings on one guitar. Yeah,
magnificent.
Really, again, carefully arranged.
That was Badfinger.
For what we consider this to be the raw rock album or whatever, a lot of intention behind
that's a good
the arrangement.
Point. And Look, I Can Love You also. I mean, it wasn't all raw rock.
And then Mike Gibbons, I love these fills that he keeps doing of the
he's kind
tom
of
and the bass and just filling. Those are very subtle fills that are not showy, but they're linking together these parts.
Yes.
And using just the bass drum and the toms in that quick timing. It's really nice. And then, ending's beautiful. Love the inversion of the melody. The last time he says just to start. It's a very well-written, kind of nice closure at the end of the song. It doesn't just... A lot of Joey songs tend to fade with some extension for the last minute.
Magnificent.
It's a very clean kind of package at the end of this song. All right, the Joey Marathon continues.
Yes.
We get to the winner.
Onward.
He just keeps going.
Almost Joey's first solo album.
Yeah, basically. By track 4, I would expect kind of what happened with Straight Up. We started getting into these more like atmospheric pieces and stuff. Here we're track 4 on Ass, and it's still just rock. There's not really that much unwinding. These are still 2.5 minute, 3 minute.
It was a firecracker of a song with not a typical ongoing Chuck Berry type of Love Me Do beat, but that, bum 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 bam bum 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 bam, and he discovered it. He wrote it. I loved it. That's all I can say.
Yeah, it's a unique concept for the song too, written about someone else thinking they're so great they can do whatever they want. I can't think of any other song that's that exact idea.
Well, and the story supposedly is John Lennon, but I don't know. Well, whatever. Okay, it's the classic rock songs, but like other songs, whether it's Passing Time to Come in the Future, and he goes to that minor chord in the chorus, and he just did enough to twist it around and tweak it where it's, to me, it was something you hadn't quite heard in that way, and loved it.
Yeah, and the ending also, where he always, he kind of writes something new, like a little outro. We all understand outro is different than, it's related, but it's a little bit different from everything you've heard in the song. It's extended.
Yeah.
Pete's playing on it.
Yes.
I think there's an octave pedal. He's hitting a low C sharp here. First time I've heard it on a Badfinger recording that this is clearly below a standard tuned guitar. I don't know, it's so weird to use it just on this song. I don't know if anyone else knows more about it. I was really surprised when I was listening carefully that there's either two guitars, one tuned an octave lower, or in 1973 he's using an octave pedal. We get towards the end of side A with Blind Owl, the first Tom Evans song.
They opened their concert with Blind Owl before the album was out. And someone from the audience said, and I believe Joey answered, what's the name of your new album? And I think the answer was Your Ass. But be that as it may, the Blind Owl is a real treat, and a long way from the acoustic demo Tom did when you hear that. I mean, of course, the opening riff by Pete Ham is totally iconic and amazing, and nothing really missed about it. The harmonies were great, and the fade out, they all were involved. And it was heavy. It took some getting used to, but I did. And the years have passed, and you just think of those guitars going off, and what a fantastic group.
This is the first song that actually is a full band effort, where the whole band is contributing. A lot of the other ones, like you said, feel like it's like them alone in a room writing this, and maybe they add a little bit of touch. But this is, there's double guitar everywhere on this song, harmonized, Pete and Joey. There's a really powerful low harmony from Pete Ham in the chorus.
Yeah.
In the outro, you have Joey singing the "Who Never Lies." Who Never Lied? I don't know. Yeah. Who Never Lies. So you hear all their voices. You got the jungle beat and kind of the weird surprise ending with the wah-wah pedal and this jungle beat. So that's some influence there. It's like a very distinct. This is a Badfinger song. This isn't just one member. Obviously, guitar solos, like all of them. The triplets in there are crazy. So great song.
We've come to the end of the 5 songs on side 1 of Ass, and we flip over what would be the last apple for a non-Beatle group or person. Or peoples, and then we see the first song on the second side, Constitution, as Joey picks it up again. Let's mention what has to be mentioned, which is the Pete Ham guitar throughout. That's what made the impression on me. It's quite remarkable to hear him. I'd say for me personally, it took some getting used to. It wasn't my fan favorite because it was a heavier sound. Constitution was saying to Badfinger fans, it's not a bubblegum group.
So we flipped the album over, but nothing changed. This is, again, just a riff totally driven by 2 guitars, just like Blind Owl. So it's kind of interesting to hear that continued. Yeah, some of it, the rhythm's a little similar to Foxy Lady. Okay, fine. We acknowledge that, but it's still so unique. And this is one of the songs that I always show my friends of any Badfinger song, because it just, again, the instrumentation of this is so strong. There's so much attitude in Pete Ham's guitar playing, which is usually much more, it's very beautiful and everything, but it's got this like attack in a lot of the phrases and in the solo and everything that's just so aggressive. You got Mike Gibbons beating the hell out of the drums, and I think the rhythm section's just so tight in this song because the bass and the drums are locked in, and it lets Pete play against that and just soar in the solo and then land into soar. That rhythm section and into the pocket there with what they were doing. And then Joey's chords are so cool because they give it that off rhythm. You hear that really well in the BBC session where it's isolated in one speaker, kind of just picking in all those different chords. But doing it in the same kind of off rhythm, which very, very cool to have all that come together and just work in such a Lego kind of built format, what each member is doing. If that wasn't complex enough, that instant transition into 3/4 time at the end for that outro.
Yeah, oh wow.
So cool.
Wow. Yeah.
And again, shows, I know people always talked about towards the end them heading in this prog rock direction. This is an example of that. It's a maybe fairly simple, but how instant they're able to do it and how they all lock into that transition.
That's a very intense change. That's almost like a motion has started,
and it's not
rhythm.
It's not standard 3/4 either. It's not like waltz. Like the way Mike Gibbons is, he's emphasizing like the backbeat in the 3/4. It's a very unique outro. I'd say.
That's great. That's true.
So. And again, kind of short and fades out, similar to Blind Owl, but live, they extended it. So I don't know. I mean, it was only 40 minutes. We could have gotten another minute or two on these songs, I think. But I guess we'll save that for the end. So with that, with the rock songs behind us, we continue on to side 2. We make a little bit of a turn, and now we're into the ballad section. There's a couple of them in a row here. Starting with When I Say by Tom Evans. We talked about it beforehand. I think this is one of his finest works. I don't know why this doesn't get more credit.
I agree. It's stunningly and achingly beautiful song. Tom is double-tracked in it, I believe. I can't deny that I've been burning inside for all the things I'll never see. That line always really stuck with me and struck me. That's almost like a man looking back on his life rather than a young person. That's just lyrically. Musically, it starts, they're chords that you're familiar with. It actually layers and builds, and the production is so beautiful. And by the time you get to the solo in the middle, the guitar solos, the first part of the solo sounds like it's Pete Ham, and the second part of the solo sounds like the Joey Mullen.
I think it's only credited to Pete, but I'd be curious if someone knows. It does also sound like Joey to me. It's not really a double guitar solo, it's a handoff, is what it sounds like.
That's what I thought. That's what
and it kind of changes speakers, but it might be Pete doing it on a separate track. What's interesting is when it's handed off, it does sound like someone's mirroring it an octave lower or harmonizing with the second riff also lower on the guitar. And an example where they cut out something, as we've heard on the alternate track, there was additional lead playing towards the end of the song that they cut, that they turned off. I think, and probably, as much as I love hearing the guitar playing, speaks to the power of the melody and the final kind of harmonies that are going on that you didn't want to potentially be, playing on top of that. So.
And Tommy singing in it is it's as pretty as anything he ever wrote. Building, and then tailoring off quietly at the end. It's almost like you've had a whole experience and gotten to the top of a mountain and coming back down.
All right, then we move into the Mike Gibbons contribution to the album. He's written other ones, but this is the first time Mike Gibbons has been singing on an official song on a Badfinger release. Yeah, it's a Western song. So maybe this was part of the appeasement. He had left the band, he rejoins, he gets a song on the album, play a little bit of slide guitar on this thing too, so that's nice to hear.
Anything Badfinger was worth knowing, and I would say Cowboy was Cowboy. Not one of the stronger tracks as it would hit your ear.
All right, well then we get into the final Joey Mullen song on the album, the ballad I Can Love You. This one, I think we might differ a little bit on it because I think it's one of the most beautiful intros of a song I've ever heard. The first minute of this song, you hear the fret movements, the action on the acoustic guitar, and this arpeggio that it goes into, and then the synth comes in. And it just totally loses me. Just the writing of the song, it's so good. I love to play it. I'd love to hear Joey play it. I'd love to hear a different mix of it. But that synth just ruins it for me. I can hardly listen to most of the song.
It brought out Joey's voice, which was different from the other voices, but no less. There's no harmony. It's him.
It's really high to sing. I will say the choruses are my favorite part. And I think that's really comfortably in his range, and he sounds great in that part.
Yeah.
The verses, I don't know, I wonder with all these Badfinger songs, and this is nothing against Joey, but why didn't they have someone write the verses and someone else write the chorus? And that's a note about this album in general. I think this is the first album that doesn't have a single song being co-written between any two members of Badfinger. Just feels like a lost opportunity. Tom or Pete singing a different melody and singing at least one verse or a middle eight or something, or Joey singing that in one of their songs. But
well, on that subject, there's few other than the miracle of Lennon and McCartney at their peak, actually, in the earlier years of...
Okay, I remember thinking as a kid when I would listen to this album that each of them got their ballad at the end. We heard Tom, we heard Mike, we heard Joey. We haven't heard from Pete recently. And wow, what does he come up with? Timeless. Here's the 7 or 8 minute, really the longest Badfinger song to date. I think he was trying to do this a little bit with I've Been Waiting maybe on Maybe Tomorrow, but this is just totally different than any other song that they had written up until this time.
I don't think it can be taken in. I didn't take it in immediately on first hearing. Some of the critics were criticizing them. It's an exhibit for a guitar player who was a virtuoso to stretch out and play he did on it. Other than him and the lead guitar, it's what he did. It's perfection, it's name of the game, it's We're for the Dark, and now it's timeless. And it's an epic tour de force to close the album. And really on its own, apart from the whole album, because the whole album was not where this song was to me. I don't know where it's from.
A lot to say about that. So Apple of My Eye opens the album, and it's, again, I think it's just an absolute showcase of humility. But this is someone who is confident in their abilities and truly spending the time and the patience to create this vision of what he wants to do in the last 3 minutes of this song. And it's so carefully illustrated that you don't even understand what's happening, when you hear it the first couple times.
No, it's too much.
He must have known how great he was when he was recording this solo, I think, and just writing this song and all of that piece and putting on an album, not just doing it in a live show. I see it as a yin and yang to Apple of My Eye a little bit, as like his send off. But yeah, it starts out really acoustic, so just going through the actual song itself. This is like the softest. I mean, there's been other acoustic songs on the album, but this is so soft when you first hear some of this playing it. It sounds like it's being accidentally recorded or something from a different room, which is not how we've heard any other song start in the band, really. Pretty quickly, the band comes in, so this is a band effort. Tom harmonizing, piano, picking out the chords, slashing guitars in the middle.
Slashing guitars.
All of that. First solo, it kind of reverts and you're ready because that chorus is so aggressive. But then in the first solo, it really starts to lean back again, and there's slide playing, which is almost a throwback. You'd think after writing something like Day After Day, there's an opportunity to make that your signature sound, write another hit song that has that. That's not really what they do, but it almost feels like a throwback that he puts this slide playing in there just to show you he hasn't forgotten and show you how far of the journey they've gone through. And the notes that he's playing in there, it's this very careful kind of meandering hesitancy around each note. And then last verse you get some synth, which I think is actually done well because normally I don't like synth. It feels like it's distracting. This is low enough that it just feels ominous. Something feels really off about the way it's being used in this song. And then you get into this like coda towards the end, the Are We Timeless, Are We, and the hypnotizing or like the cyclical chords that are just this purgatory with the synth over and over.
It becomes hypnotic.
You don't know when it's going to come in, and it's again, let's pretend like we don't know what's going to happen in the last 3 minutes of this song. What is going on? Like we did these two choruses, and it's just like adding these weird layers, but nothing seems sure of itself. And then just out of nowhere, this guitar, the solo, yes, we'll get into all, but just the tone of the guitar is so different than anything you would expect if you listen to just the first couple minutes of this song. There's no other song on this album that has this. Maybe it'll fade out after a minute. It just keeps going. It starts getting faster and ramping up more and more and doing like the 3-note bends that we both love where he plays entire chords. And so rather than like on other songs where it's we get a taste of it and then it's almost like the tantalizing as it fades out. Oh, I wish I could have heard the rest of it. We get to hear the rest of the solo and it just keeps going and going and going. The reason I could learn this song is because each phrase he plays is melodic enough that you could almost sing the whole 3-minute outro he's playing on solo. I don't know many 3-minute solos where you could literally like sing the melody of them.
Master of melody.
But he does repeat one phrase about a minute in, and that's because then he's switching on the wah-wah pedal, I think, as he's doing that. And then you get him using that wah-wah pedal to add inflection and make it even more interesting halfway through. As you get towards the end of the solo, and like you're saying, that wall of synth starts coming up, or whatever that is, all of that outro, he starts like competing for your attention, and he starts bending even more, like these three-step bends that feel to me like he's competing, he's drowning in the synth, and he's just fighting to still be heard over it. And then you get that scale that live they would end the song by playing this scale. It's symmetry with Apple of My Eye because it's a very similar scale to the way the album starts by doing that, probably unintentionally, but it works out very well. And then again on the album, he doesn't fade out and end on the last note. He still goes back and keeps soloing, and again he's competing for your attention, and just such a great ending to the album that I don't know that it fits in with everything else. I think it is, you can tell something with Apple of My Eye that those are the opening and closing. I think there is a lot of symbolism to that. But otherwise, it does kind of feel like this is punching above its weight. If there's any outtake from these sessions that I find fascinating, other than, there's great bonus tracks and everything, but it's him working on Timeless. There's a take where he's like choreographing where the solo is going to go and leaving out a lot of notes, but just seeing where in the scale, what box he wants to present it in. And it's got a really touching ending that I've never heard him do anywhere else, where he's just screaming in this high-pitched note as it fades out. I don't know. I don't think that was the version that was given to Apple initially, but it's almost like he wasn't sure what to do and he wanted it to be like a vocal crescendo. And then in this final version, maybe he decided to go with the guitar solo. I'm not sure, but
it's like a Rhapsody in Blue for rock. It's got the different parts that are connected, and I don't think you get there by only spontaneity. You have to have an ability to be spontaneous, which God knows he had, and they all had, for that matter. But this is pretty much a masterpiece.
So those are the 10 tracks on Ass by Badfinger, released at the end of '73, and it's got an interesting place in the canon. I think this is obviously kind of a tipping point for what's coming, but
that's true.
I think it has some really strong songwriting on the album, and kind of reflecting on it, I think the production was pretty good on a lot of these songs. How do you make this a top 10 album? Maybe there's some things that are commercially questionable, but as a Badfinger fan, I mean, you gotta love this thing. So.
And we do.